Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Well, while we wait for that promoted guest, let us go on to our major topic of discussion on today's morning show. It has been one eventful week in Nigeria with what is coming to existence of a mega-partisan coalition ostensibly to challenge the re-election of President Bola Tinubu during the 2027 election. And then the issue of constitutional review re-emerges with the commencement of the zonal public hearings by the National Assembly. For some form of agenda setting on this matter, we are now being joined by Chief Michael Aondoakaa, the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, former Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Now, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, is leading this constitutional review process. And we also have, local government empowerment initiatives, we have women empowerment initiatives, and we also have new state creations. Just last week, passing the second reading was the creation of Ethiopia State out of Delta State. We also have Anioma State being touted by a senator of the same National Assembly. Do you think that this is a useful use of the time of our lawmakers to be creating new states? And why do you believe that there is a drive to do so? And do you believe that the constitutional review process itself will be successful?
Well, thank you very much. I wonder, in the challenges we have, the desirability of having new states. It does appear, if not because of the deregulation of the petroleum industry and the removal of subsidy, most states could hardly pay their salaries or meet their obligations. So I really do not understand the basis for more states creation, because agitation for more states is born out of political selfishness. It's not really a purely legal matter. Everybody wants to have a state where he has an influence, where he can become a governor, where he can become the godfather and whatever. If you look at Canada, Canada is 11 times bigger than Nigeria. They have just about 7 provinces. So I guess worried when we are talking of creation of more states. I don't think it's out of legal consideration. It's more of a political consideration and even more of selfish consideration. Then when you come to issue of women empowerment, women empowerment is desirable. I think the issue of 30% affirmative action should be included in the Constitution. So if you see our population, you have a lot of, almost large population of women, almost equal to men, and highly skilled, highly desirable. Corruption is less on the side of women, honestly. Therefore, affirmative actions, giving them 30%, are supported completely.
All right, thank you so much for that. Now, of course, we know the bar for creating a state is very high. It requires support of 2/3 of legislators, and at federal and state levels, also including a local referendum as well. And we've seen lawmakers receive about 31 different requests for new states in various regions. Now, juxtaposing this with current issues we have across different states in Nigeria, for instance, the Warri delineation exercise is still being debated, people still debating where their roots are. Critics even argue that creating some of these new states would increase the cost of governance. We're seeing states with regards to the tax reform saying that, listen, this is going to be detrimental to us. We are going to be on the negative receiving side of these reforms with the current states that we have. Now, looking at all of these issues, what safeguards are going to ensure that every new state is economically viable and is able to look after itself. That's one. And then two, do you think there's even any political willpower in the creation of these states? Do you think that this is something that, as our leaders, they are ready to do and is completely essential on the table at this time?
Completely, it's not essential. And I've earlier stated it's out of political and selfish consideration. It's purely the cost of getting governance will be high. You have more governance. You know the overhead of governance, salaries, motorcades, House Assembly. So the money that's supposed to be channeled to development will be used on overhead costs. It's absolutely not desirable. And I can tell you that it is only in Nigeria that state creation has become a ritual. It's as if every session of the legislature, state creation is not on the, constitutional amendment is on the table. Constitutional amendment is supposed to be done on very serious matters that have been tested, and the injustice occasioned by the previous provision is identified. For instance, we noticed that the injustice of transmission of power in the absence of the president was clear. There was a problem. Of course, the National Assembly has to come in their wisdom on the doctrine of necessity. That manifested itself, and that clearly gave the desirability of amending that provisions of the Constitution. And down, if the president travels or the governor travels more than 25, there's the deputy governor is deemed to be the acting governor. That is a desirable amendment. But for now, what purpose are we doing amendments of this Constitution? We create amendments to a level that it becomes counterproductive. Every day, every constitutional National Assembly, there's creation of amendment of Constitution. Amendments of Constitution are supposed not to be a ritual. It becomes an agenda on that of every assembly. That is, it's supposed to be a holistic national issue that touches and the effect is known. Constitution has to be tested. Provisions of the Constitution tested, interpreted by the Supreme Court, and where the interpretation of the Supreme Court comes with injustices, then we cannot think of amending those provisions. We have not tested the Constitution. The governors have not even given us the development desirable from each of the states. Few are doing, but most are not doing. Then you want to come to say you want to create a state. What are you creating the state for? What is the injustice? The injustice there is lack of governance, not because state is not created. It's because the governors, where there's strong agitations, there's imbalance, there's failure of government and all this. So I think we have to be careful on this issue of creation of state or this issue of constitutional amendment every time. Since 1999, every National Assembly comes up with creation of a state. This is not what's supposed to be. It's supposed not to be an agenda of the National Assembly, except we have identified something that, if it is not corrected, it can be injurious. Just like I mentioned earlier, when the president traveled, the late President Yar'Adua traveled, power was not transmitted, there was a lacuna. Yes, in that case, the National Assembly can come in and create. And you saw the support that came from the state. The two-days concurrence from the state came almost 100% because there was a lacuna. But then, if you're not saying creating a state, now you have those states desirable raising creation of their state from data. How are you sure? The issue is almost a failure on arrival, because when you send it to other states for concurrence, in my mind, it's very difficult because they themselves might have had agitations for state creation and it's not considered. They will vote negative. So it's just, to me, it's an academic exercise. That is most unproductive and most unhelpful to Nigeria.
Okay, we get your point, sir. But of course, I also personally commend you for for putting your voice behind the 30% or 35% affirmative action. I'm sure that a lot of women will applaud you, including the two with me in the studio. But then two questions, Mr. Aondoakaa, SAN. First will be that, yes, I understand your misgivings about some aspect of this reform and amendment to the Constitution. But then as it concerns the aspect of electoral reforms, which area do you think that Nigerians should focus on, particularly now that the zonal hearings are about to start? We know of the aspect of the electronic transmission of results, for example, the use of beavers. Many are even saying that some of the guidelines contained in within INEC's guidelines ought to be constitutionally, recognized. What are your views on this very topical issue, given the fact that we are already preparing for 2027 elections? And then secondly, you've mentioned repeatedly the aspect of mandatory transfer of power to the vice president if the president is indisposed. I'm sure that you have heard former President Goodluck Jonathan recently, very recently, come out to say that he was stopped from having power transferred to him by an individual, an aide to the former president, the late Aondoakaa, whom you served as the Attorney General. You had a ringside view of what happened at that time. Can you recall? Do you know who President Jonathan was talking about? And what were your views when all these things were happening that time?
Let me be honest and tell Nigerians that I prepared transmission of power, and President Aondoakaa signed it. It was given to the then Principal Private Secretary, David Idebe. And when it was handed over to Abaji, who was then advisor on liaison office, I don't know what happened. But I heard, it could be rumors, that Abaji said throughout the tenure of Obasanjo, President Obasanjo, power not transmitted. My argument to Ab then was that Obasanjo was never sick. So between that to the National Assembly, nobody saw the power. The transmitted power signed by President Aondoakaa. This is the honest truth, and I'm saying it to Nigerians. Aondoakaa transmitted power. And normally, executive bees and executive information are taken to National Assembly by the advice of the liaison office, the National Assembly liaison. It was Abaji. It was given to him. But I heard he argued that during President Obasanjo, power was not transmitted. And when this argument was presented to me, I think I was on board on British Airlines to travel. I was called. And I said, look, Obasanjo never went on leave, and Obasanjo never got sick. So please, let the person stop talking nonsense. That's the best I can recollect. What happened after that, I don't know.
May I quickly cut in,
It is
sir?
a very unfortunate thing
yes.
Because during the time of President Aondoakaa, he insisted that if he's not around, all mails directed to him should be sent to the vice president. Aondoakaa also, all the vice president presided most time on the Federal Executive Council. So there was even no basis to even infer that Aondoakaa would not sign transmission of power, because the vice president then, in the absence of the president, was presiding regularly on the Federal Executive Council and taking decisions that bind the country. So he did, and I can tell you categorically that we transmitted power. We sent the Minister of Justice who drafted it. Myself, my PAMSEC, we drafted it. My PAMSEC there was Alhaji Yola. We drafted it. We took it to the villa. We gave it to them. We submitted it to the villa. and also to David Debe, who was the principal private secretary, handed over to Abaji. Then that is where arguments started coming between Abaji and whoever he chose to talk with in the villa, that President Obasanjo. But incidentally, the same person who was in government, or I was sacked, but the same person remained in the government of President Jonathan.
Sorry.
The same person whom the transmission of power was given remained in the government of President. We who did the correcting, I was sacked.
I want to confirm.
I'm not regretting. I'm just telling. I'm open up today to tell Nigerians the truth of what transpired.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I want to confirm because it was reported on the 16th of December 2009 that you had said that the president can effectively perform his official functions without actually being in the country, as the law does not specify, that he should always be around to discharge the duties of his office. And I also want to ask you about politics and the office of the Minister of Justice or the Attorney General of the Federation. It's being, in light of this new ADC coalition, it's being rumored that Abubakar Malami, who is also a former Attorney General of the Federation from 2015, I believe, to 2023, that he will be going for governor of Kebbi State. I want to know your thoughts on Attorney Generals running for office.
First, let me come to the issue of the power of the president. The power of the president or any chief executive at all is embodied in the person, not the physical office. Because you cannot say if president is outside, that is outside his office, he cannot exercise executive powers. You cannot say if the president have gone to the United Nations, he ceases to be president of Nigeria, he cannot exert the executive powers. The executive powers, and I repeat, anybody can challenge me, they are embodied in the person, not the physical office. And what I meant was that, and after that, it was followed. Jonathan went to Brazil and still exercised powers. President Buhari was in England, was he not exercising powers? The president now is in St. Lucia. Has he ceased to be president of Nigeria because he has gone on an official trip to St. Lucia? The executive powers of anybody is in the office, is in the person. If you are the MD of a bank, are you saying if they meet you by the road with a memo to sign, you will not sign? Nowadays, they transmit approvals on their laptop. And if so, the MD is airborne and there's an urgent approval for payment of monies or transfer. He will not sign because I'm not in the office. This is common sense. And that time, people try to play politics with what is purely legal. Because all the powers exercised by the president flows to ministers delegated to executive is because he is exercising an executive power which is embodied in his person. Once the person is elected, the power is embodied in him, not the physical of it. It's desirable for the president to be around. But certain circumstances, official trips, and unforeseen circumstances can occur that will require the president to still exercise his power if he's not physically in the country. He can declare war. He can prevent attack on Nigeria. It doesn't mean he has to run back from United Nations or President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is in St. Lucia. He has to run back from Secretariat to take an executive action that will prevent the country from calamity. This is the position. On the issue of Malami, I have not met him to discuss with him, but he is entitled to freedom of association. I have not met him, but he is entitled to freedom of an association. He is no longer an attorney general. Even if he were, he has the right to resign and go and pursue any gubernatorial mission he so desires in any political party he chooses to. That is but I have not met him, so I cannot confirm whether he is going to contest or not. We are friends, but I have never discussed the issue of, I have not called him. But after I leave here, I will call him to ask him, Honorable Attorney General, what is the position? Are you joining ADC or you are still with us in APC? Anybody can leave any political party. And it's also desirable for a healthy democracy, there should be also opposition. It is also, you cannot play football one side. There must be another side. So I think those are clamoring for another. It makes the people ruling to improve on their capacity to rule and improve on their capacity to endear themselves to the electorate. I don't believe that and I think, yes.
Okay.
I don't believe it's healthy for the country to have a one-party system. And the president himself said he's a Democrat and he doesn't believe in one party. When I mean President Ahmed Tinubu, he said he doesn't believe in one-party system. But he cannot stop people from coming to join his political parties. Likewise, he cannot stop people from going to ADC or any political party.
Okay, understood. All right, just to quickly circle back to the clarification that you made regarding what happened in 2009-2010 regarding the failure to properly transfer power to the former vice president who eventually became president. Will you therefore say that what happened constituted a criminal offense and an injustice to Nigerians as at that time? And then as the Attorney General, who had the president's express approval to transfer power, were you so powerless as to have been stopped by a nameless aide to the president?
All Attorney Generals, including all ministers, do not communicate to National Assembly. Only one channel communicates to the National Assembly, and that is the presidency. No minister can officially write to the Senate president. They will first not even, it's a breach of protocol. So Attorney General also communicates his views to the president or the presidency, and it is from there it's transmitted to National Assembly. Except the National Assembly requests specifically to the Attorney General that I want a legal opinion on this. In that case, he will write to the Senate President or the Speaker, but still copy the presidency. In this scenario, the scenario is not like the National Assembly was requesting an opinion from me. My executive action was required to transmit. It's not me who was going to sign the transmission. Transmission of power is not signed by the Attorney General. Transmission of power is signed by the president himself. All that the Attorney General does, he drafts the instrument and sends it to the president to sign.
All right, let's still stick within the conversation of electoral reform. Of course, we know strengthening electronic voting and digital transmission of results is a very, very focal point on this ongoing...
Thank you, Vatu. First on this, we need to simplify the things. First, election petitions should not be technical. Once a petition is presented and it is understood, the issue of format should be removed. Once the contents of the petition are understood, let me start from there. And then the second aspect is that the issue which was surprising to me, we cannot overlook the Evidence Act. It's an act of National Assembly. And when a subpoenaed evidence is precluded from testifying on the ground that the evidence was not attached to the petition, that is a serious issue that has to be addressed. You cannot, filing a petition, ask your adversary, especially a defendant, to also give you a statement to attach to file a petition. So it looks like there's absurdity there. Therefore, it should be clarified that a subpoenaed evidence can be elicited after the petition was filed, and that should constitute valid evidence. Okay. Of course, we have the issue of INEC-like guidelines. Ordinarily, I was of the opinion that INEC-like guidelines are constitutional because they flow from the powers vested to them. But there's also need now that there's a different interpretation about INEC guidelines to incorporate in the constitutional review and future electoral reforms that the guidelines of INEC are significant and as valid as the law itself. Therefore, we cannot say we're having two sets. INEC have their guidelines, and when they disobey their guidelines, we say no, the guidelines are not necessary for prove a case against INEC. We should make sure that they are bound by their guidelines. If they say they will transmit results electronically, they should be bound by it. They said they will transmit results from their portal, from the polling station, as stipulated in the guide. They should be bound by that. And that should be very explicit, not only in the guideline, but in the Electoral Act, and of course also make a provision in the constitutional amendment that INEC guidelines flowing from that are also constitutional. That will put this thing to rest. But one area that was amazing to me, and I'm still confused as a lawyer, is that we have an Electoral Act. We also have the Evidence Act. Both are laws of the Federation. And the Evidence Part empowers you to serve subpoena on a party that is in custody of evidence that can support you, who is refusing to bring it. And when you have served it and he brings it, then we come back and say, Electoral Act says all petition must be filed, so the evidence ought to have been filed. Don't you see there's an absurdity there? Can you file a petition and go to a defendant who is in custody of evidence you materially need and ask him to give you a statement so you can annex your petition? But the law was not clear. Therefore, it was interpreted in such a way that all such evidence ought to be elicited and attached to the petition. Then now we have an opportunity to make a clarification on that such evidence is valid, even after the filing of petition. Evidence obtained by subpoena should be considered as valid evidence for petition. This will go a long way.
Thank you very much, Aondoakaa SAN, former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, for joining us on the morning show here on Arise News.